Hi, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Welcome if you're currently here in the live premiere. Today we got two key new things to look at, one of which is a new post by Justin Rounds, his response to hearing about the court hearing of Brenner being delayed. As well, we're looking at this news article by The Sun, which goes into some additional detail, I believe. I'm not quite sure if it's the one that was mentioned by Weezer recently about new evidence being found, but we're going to read that article today and see if it links on or if it mentions anything else and check for consistencies or inconsistencies. And later we can catch up on even more comments, acknowledge more questions and more key interesting talk. So it could be a longer video today compared to previous videos, so it's best advised that try and watch from start to finish so you fully understand what's being talked about, okay? Shout out to regular people that do watch, and those that are watching live right now, feel free to participate in the live chat box, the right-hand side of the screen. Share your thoughts, opinions, and reactions about this case, what's going on, and what's being talked about in this video. Is there anything else to acknowledge? Well, if you would like to check out the previous video after watching this, feel free to do so. It's available on my channel page, easy to find and clear to search, okay? There'll be some links down below in the comment section pinned if you wish to visit them too. But I think with that all being said and done, the order of how we're going to do things today is look at Justin Rounds' recent post on Facebook in response to the court hearing being delayed. As you already know, we've documented Candice Cooley's response, where basically she was very formal about it. She wasn't displaying much emotion in that text. She wasn't really displaying much frustration either. Maybe it's because she's tired of it all and she's used to it by now. But, you know, with taking that into mind, and I'm sure some of you will remember, take into consideration where we compare that to Justin Rounds' response and see if there's a difference in emotion expressed. Let's head on over to the Facebook page right now and see. Here we are, just scrolling on down, 5th of October, so very recent at 20:47. It reads, and I think this is like a repost or a screenshot of where it was posted originally, where it says East Idaho News, hearing for suspect accuser Dylan Rounds delayed as family continues search for missing man. Now, I don't know if that article on screen is one what we've already looked at beforehand. Maybe we did, or maybe we just analysed the video and this is the transcript of it. But Justin Rounds responded with his own caption saying, "Seeing this is like getting kicked straight in the gut. I'm so grateful people share and are so concerned. I sure miss this kid." So immediately you can see a massive change. You know, when you compare it to Candice Cooley's response and Justin Rounds, Justin shows more emotion, more of a disheartened feel, which is a normal thing, of course. I wonder why Candice Cooley didn't show this level. Maybe it's because she's already used to it by now and become numb to it because of how ridiculous things are and how stuff is dragged out. But just let me know your thoughts down below, right? Because what Justin says here, you could say it's coming from the heart. It's he's expressing himself, showing his level of disappointment, but also sadness to how things have come about even this late on into the case. Yeah. The feeling of getting kicked straight in the gut after all this time as well. So it goes to show how impactful it still is, right? That lack of closure, that lack of justice, that lack of healing, certain set order, right? As we mentioned previously. Let's just check the comments out if possible, just to see what else has been added. You never know. Justin Rounds has left an additional comment here saying, "I never get to see him again in this lifetime. It is unimaginable sometimes." So you can start really seeing it from Justin if you yourself have never seen it before, right? Whilst covering, and documenting this and that reaction, it's to compare and contrast to how other people have responded, but it's also to present to you and those out there who may doubt certain individuals within the case, certain family members on how they respond and react to stuff. Well, this is an example of what's going through their mind and how they're feeling at this moment, okay? For your pain, makes me sick. And sometimes we look through the comments here just to see if there's any responses, key questions. What does Justin say now? F, I'm mad. That was posted Thursday. So I guess it was all on the same day, right? So he showed sadness, which is normal, but also frustration. So Justin there saying, "Frick, I'm mad." Okay, what's the response? You have every right. Candice Howard, not seen Candice Howard for a long time. She responds to Justin saying, "Those feelings are valid AF." Now, when Candice Howard says AF, she isn't using that little slogan which the AF crew had on YouTube next to their username. AF is short for as beep, the F word, right? Does that make sense? As beep. I don't want to say the word because I don't want YouTube to screw me over, right? But where Justin Rounds says F, I'm mad, the F means the F word, right? It sounds so silly that, but you know, I just don't want to compromise these videos because it is important what we're covering, right? Justin Rounds also says, I know it's stupid to put it here, but I don't even know where to talk about it. Response-wise, oh, and you know, before we go any further, whatever's mentioned here, it's all public. It's on Facebook, public. Justin's Rounds account is public. It's all publicly viewable before anyone does question, right? Live over a mile, put it wherever. So it does appear that Justin Rounds is struggling more than Candice Cooley is from what's mentioned here. Most of this is more like advice and just helping out. But if you do want to pause the video at any point just to read the comments, you can if you want. It says, not stupid, real life grief and frustration, empathy to you. We went through this in 2016. Talk about hanging out, talking to one another. What's this one? I can't imagine your pain. And Snooks. I don't know who Snooks or Snook is. I don't know if it's the one from YouTube. Oh, it is. Justin Rounds. Ah, okay, so Snooks. How do I explain this? Now, first of all, before anyone loses their head, take in mind that this person's username is the same as it is on YouTube, and this is all public. I already know that people are going to have a meltdown because I'm reading this comment out and it relates back to the true crime community on YouTube to do with Bob Farrell. But this person, Snooks, has clearly worded it here themselves publicly, right? So I'm just reading what's in front of me. If people don't know who Snooks is, well, at one point they had a profile picture on YouTube where the head was tilted and they had a cowboy hat on. And when they talk, it's kind of like a slowed down version of the Shack Lady where they're like, well, you know, we just need to work things out. Oh, dear, I'm sorry. But, you know, we just need all to work together. Oh, what, you're crazy. Can you please calm down over there? If you're not gonna help or contribute, maybe it's best time you walk away. Yes, this is me. I'm trying to talk not in a sarcastic way, but it's really difficult to... You know that person? I only do these just so it's more... I don't know, explainable to you because some people do pick up on it easier than if I was to describe it visually, okay? So, Snooks here says, please, Justin Rounds, come to Bob Farrell's channel to talk about this. He just donated some money to Rigby High School for the FFP in Dylan's name. So Snooks is a co-host on Bob Farrell's channel on YouTube, does those live stream interviews. Now, you know, I don't know if this comment is a bit dodgy in a sense because I'm sure Justin Rounds wouldn't bother anyway. But by Snooks trying to get Justin Rounds onto Bob Farrell's channel, is that a good thing? I'm only saying that because when you think about it, on Bob Farrell's channel, Jim Terry, Mr. X is on there. So if Justin Rounds doesn't always get on well with those two, but then also you got people in the background as well, because Bob Farrell's community, most of those have gathered all together now collectively, right? So some of the odd few people I've come across in the past have gathered over that way because they kind of relate to one another. So it's like having a load of fish in one barrel. You can see where they're all at, right? But by Snooks trying to get Justin Rounds to come on over to that channel, that live stream call-in, could it get a little bit awkward? You know, maybe Snooks could be like, Justin, hey, come on over to Bob Farrell's channel. We'll do a live. We'll talk it all out. And then suddenly gets ambushed by Jim Tay, Mr. X, and other people jumping onto the panel and then start questioning Justin Rounds. I don't know. Could it go downhill? Probably. But is it going to happen? Unlikely. Because I don't think Justin Rounds is going to give time of day to anyone on YouTube from the looks of it and what he's previously said. But this is very interesting how you think about it. The Dylan Rounds case and community, all of those characters and key names out there, how they just appear on Facebook here and there, how they just randomly leave a comment like 28 Alice did on one of Candice Cooley's posts in the past. And you think, isn't it weird how they're all relating and being all nicey and trying to appear as caring to these family members when they have been on other channels and pages, which those channels and pages have either attacked the family or has caused disruption in the case, which is seen as disrespect to Dylan Rounds. And it's like, is that just like a memory loss thing, or is it just disassociating for a bit? Like, you could be on one side and then think, you know what, I want to get closer to the people within, so I'm just going to disassociate from that bad group, that bad egg, and appear all nice and caring towards the family. I don't know, it could be a lot of psychological warfare going on over time. It's like a game of chess. That's what it really is, okay? And there's a few people out there that play chess as well, isn't that right? Well, let's just move on. What else do we have? So sorry, just he will get what he's got coming. But will he, though? Will that happen to Brenner? Because if Brenner dies because of age or illness, has justice fully been, retrieved? I don't know. None of us can begin to imagine the pain I've always seen and heard in my dad when he talks my Uncle Larry, some other Larry. So sorry, not stupid, feelings are real. So many things, something to think about. What's this? I went last year with, family come first. Reach out to me if there is something I can do. Right, so that level of help. This is like a demonstration that the members and the people on this page won't be directly associated with Dylan Rounds or just on Justin's profile, that there are people out there that do care and they're trying to help Justin in different ways, as you see here. So it's just another way of mentioning it. But we got Donna here saying, I know Candice Cooley mentioned in an interview that you have continued to look for Dylan. Why don't you try something new? There are so many other qualified search and recovery organizations and retirees who have done this for a living. Why not get a new set of eyes to do this search? Have every open mine been searched with drones? The University of Nevada at Reno, the world-renowned program of engineers and equipment with drones and artificial intelligence to have the capability to look at those mines. The thing is, it depends who has the final say when it comes to these searches of when they happen and who's allowed to assist or volunteer. Is it joint decision by Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds, or is it more so Candice Cooley has the final say of who comes in and who comes out? Does anyone know? What would you say if you had to guess? Is it 50-50 or more one-sided a certain way? And because the public aren't really welcome in the search for Dylan Rounds and it's more private now and closed off compared to how it was at one point in the past, I don't know if new people would be welcome and if they would be willing to reach out to others. I guess time will tell. Thoughts and prayers. So sorry, Justin. I know how you feel. Here we go. Justin, on a Friday, following day, saying, thank you everyone for the kind words. My son Colton Rounds told me the other day someone needs to shut my Facebook off after 8 p.m. Lol, maybe he's right. So that's like reflecting back on the day, maybe when you've sat down and then your thoughts start running away with you. I guess that's what's happened to Justin at times. Okay, that's just more personal stuff. Unimaginable. Box Elder County cannot be any more incompetent. Can they be any more incompetent? I think they could be more incompetent, but that just hasn't happened yet. So, besides that post by Justin Rounds, that's about it for there. As said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section about Justin Rounds' response. I would argue and say that's probably the one time, at least from what I've seen publicly, where Justin has expressed the most emotion. I mean, seen it in the past, here and there, glimpses of it. Sometimes it was anger, frustration, other times a bit of sadness, other times, I don't know, withholding things. But in that post there, you could see a lot came out. But massive contrast from Candice Cooley, right? The way Candice Cooley mentioned it was just formally stating that the hearing has been pushed back to November time 13th. And that was it. Maybe the odd comment about, oh, it's frustrating about what's going on. But that's it. Whereas Justin Rounds wasn't really talking about when the actual date is coming up or why or how it's been delayed, just simply his own response to it. So it's more personal, more genuine. And obviously this could give more ammunition for people to call out Candice Cooley and say, well, clearly she doesn't care because she's not showing emotion. But at the end of the day, I think one thing to acknowledge is at times, and it doesn't have to be time of death, it can be other random occurrences and events where people will react differently to one another. If people somehow end up laughing at a funeral because they have that nervous laughter or they don't know how to react at times, so it gets a bit awkward for them. If that can happen and that can be accepted, then maybe to an extent it can be accepted with Candice Cooley maybe holding it more together than some of the other family members are. Maybe, I don't know, it's not guaranteed, but down the line, if there is some kind of justice, maybe that's when Candice Cooley does break down and show emotion. But because they're not over the finish line yet, why release yourself now if you're able to try and hold it together, to push forwards, to get the justice? Although it's hard, you know, maybe someone has to be that way, as maybe Candice Cooley has mentioned previously. Anyway, this is just to document, to share it with you. It's all public, as said, so there's no issues there. But what we can do now is move on to that Sun article and see what was mentioned there, because it was posted quite recently. The title of this article reads, Dylan Rounds' mom blames cops for huge search delay when suspect James Brenner clearly moved missing son's body. This is by Steve Brenner, updated 1739 ET, October the 1st, 2023. So very recent, but the actual title of this article is significantly different to what we've seen recently by East Idaho News and that Nate Eaton interview. Those were more about the delay in Brenner's hearing, but this is almost referring back to the search for Dylan. Interesting. And I don't know if it's a coincidence, but the way it talks about James Brenner in the title and then below the article was created by Steve Brenner, spelt the exact same. I assume that Steve Brenner is not related to James Brenner. If anyone does want to do some background research within the right reasons, feel free to do so. I guess it's just a coincidence, but a very strange one to say the least, because there's been a few coincidences within this case overall. I can't think back to all of them, but I'm sure some of you might pick up on them. So, this title, let's just break it down first of all. Dylan Rounds' mom, Candice Cooley, is blaming cops for huge search delay when suspect Brenner clearly moved missing son's body. So, before we get any further, the way it's worded here, it's as if Brenner buried Dylan and then moved him on afterwards as a form of desecration, removing a concealed body and placing it elsewhere. And in that time of delay, when police should have been searching and assisting, they weren't, so it enabled the opportunity for Brenner to move Dylan about multiple areas, locations. That's how it seems to be worded here. And have we heard that officially by Candice Cooley or news programs in the past? Maybe not exactly. It seems to be a bit more, focused here, the way it's stated. But Candice Cooley hasn't brought this up recently in any of the interviews by Nate Eaton. When Nate asked her the question, what about the update regarding searches for Dylan Rounds? Candice Cooley didn't mention any of this. So it's making me think, is this reflecting back to what was said in the past, possibly? Well, whether it's the past or present, we're going to be analysing it today. And if any of you noticed key interesting information or contradictions, hypocrisy, whatever, feel free to state it down below in the comment section and, maybe add a time mark on it if you want. As well, at any point in this video, feel free to pause it, okay? So, the cops, Ellie, huge search delay. What? I didn't think it was a huge search delay. That seems a bit of an exaggeration. Let me be honest with you. So Candice Cooley got down there with Justin Rounds on the 30th of May 2022. 31st is when Kurt Wadsworth called into family, also police, about the psychic passing on info that Dylan is held hostage. Whether it be all on the same day of the 31st with a bit of delay over the day, police finally went down there to investigate, to search for Dylan, and so did Justin. Supposedly, Candice Cooley was left at the Grange Shed property or nearby, watching over Brenner. Well, that happened, right? And within the first week, they also found Dylan Round's boots pretty quick. And then on the 19th of June, they came across Dylan's phone at Lucerne Pond. So really, searches were already underway for Dylan Rounds from the beginning. It was just that key equipment, such as the canine dogs, cadaver dogs, were delayed, partially because of the rain. Said that it drops to a 20% success rate. So it was delayed. The usage of drones, the pilots not being present, but the drones were, or vice versa. That was delayed as well and never really happened. That Texas Equisearch, that was delayed because the police didn't give the green thumbs up early on. So yeah, certain resources and equipment were delayed, but the initial search for Dylan was already underway. So this seems a bit odd, the title of it, but maybe there might be more context below. Exclusive. In quotes, gross negligence. Dylan Rounds had been missing for almost 500 days, but his devastated mom, Candice Cooley, is still searching for answers. There's no body, and the man accused of killing the 20-year-old on his farm in Lucerne, Utah, following his disappearance on the May 28th last year, has not been convicted. So it's basically mentioning here, Dylan Round's body has not been found, and that the man known as James Brenner, who killed the 20-year-old, who was 19 years old at the time, well, not much has followed up from there since. After being charged, he's not been convicted. And that drags out, as we've seen recently with those interviews on East Idaho News about the hearing being pushed back to November 13th with Brenner. But is it worded correctly here? Well, the way it says, the killing of Dylan Rounds on his farm in Lucerne. What? I mean, you can argue and say that might tie in with what Corey has been saying all along, that Dylan never made it to the Grange Shed property, and maybe what some others have said. But if we're following the initial story of what we've heard from the family, right, over time, that Dylan did make it to the Grange Shed, and then he was ambushed and taken out from there. Well, you could argue and say the way it's been worded here is incorrect, because Dylan's last phone ping, when he was alive, supposedly, was near to the Grange Shed property. So why is it mentioning here that Dylan was killed at his own farm, if he was able to make it out of his farm to the Grange Shed, and then he was taken out? So you could argue and say it's incorrect how it's been worded here. So this seems already a bit dodgy. Dylan Rounds went missing in May 2022, reported missing on the 30th of May, went missing a few days before the 28th. There's Brenner, as you can see, we've seen that one before. It says James Brenner, 59 years of age, who was squatting on the property, has a violent criminal history, has been charged with aggravated murder, and abuse or desecration of a human body, along with other firearm charges. Yep. He was arrested in June 2022 and remains the only suspect. Interesting. Well, it does say remains the only suspect, in that at the beginning, Chase Venstra was treated as a suspect, but then that wore off eventually. But it's interesting how it doesn't even highlight that Don is a potential suspect or anything like that. They're keeping him quiet. So it makes you think, could there be a bit of interest going on behind the scenes? For someone like Don to be friends with Brenner and close to him, especially on the day it all unfolded, and yet for Don not to be talked about that much in news articles anymore by Candice Cooley, and partially by Justin Rounds as well. Someone so close to it all happening on the day Dylan was murdered, and yet Don is just no longer talked about in articles. There must be more to it, surely. Anyway, it continues here saying, with regards to Brenner was booked into Weber County Jail in Ogden on federal charges, and then in March of this year, Box Elder County Attorney Blair Waddle confirmed Brenner was the suspect. However, the trial for Dylan's murder continues to be painfully slow. A few old images there from previous court hearings. Complete act. Dylan Rounds, murder suspect, limps in court as dad blast despicable act. Now this is kind of old, right? From months ago, from the last hearing, because I don't know why that's mentioned now. Well, anyway. Set off. Dylan Rounds' dad reveals son's killer's possible motive after murder charge. When mom, Candice Cooley, sat down with the US son at Crime Con. So I'm not quite sure if this is the one what Weezer was referring to. Weezer said that the US Sun did an article recently, and I'm just thinking, could this be the same one? Well, Weezer, let me know, right? But the fact that some media outlet news group was at CrimeCon in recent time where Candice Cooley attended, okay, getting the message across, and it led to this article being written, I guess. So when Candice Cooley sat down with the Sun at CrimeCon in Orlando for an emotional and heartfelt interview, the anger and frustration over the way Box Elder police force handled the investigation was evident throughout. Right. The fact that it says a very emotional and heartfelt interview, and yet when Candice Cooley had the interview with Nate Eaton, which was very short and pretty straight to the point, Candice Cooley was all smiling and being happy. So maybe just because it was more informal, that interview, and with the US Sun, they were sitting down and had to talk longer, so open up more, possibly. What else does it say then? Candice Cooley said she still can't believe the incompetence of officers and strongly believes her beloved son was literally under our feet before he was allegedly moved by the killer. That's very, very interesting, that. What this is suggesting is the possibility that Dylan Rounds was buried near to the Grainshed property at the time when the family were down there, but because the police supposedly didn't act quick enough, whilst that time Brenner had a free man before he was arrested in June. So from the 28th up to June the 16th or so, that Brenner had all that time to move Dylan's body about. So a form of desecration, removing a previously concealed body and moving it elsewhere, so it makes it harder to find. 2 different spots. That kind of links back to Candice Cooley, what she mentioned in the past and what Indiana highlighted last night about the 2 hit locations where dogs over time when searching for Dylan reacted in a certain way with 2 particular locations. That could have been the spot where Dylan Rounds was once buried and then moved on afterwards. But because the police did not take Brenner in at the beginning, with Brenner having time to walk about as a free man, in that time he may have spent removing Dylan's body and putting it elsewhere. This is interesting because we've not really heard this take on the case for a while. Take in mind, I was one of the first ones, at least covering the videos on the case, to mention the possibility of this form of desecration, and also take in mind quite a few of the Salty Pancake viewers or ex-viewers showed denial and said to me that no, it's not possible, it wouldn't be the case. Desecration means only one thing, breaking up a body or burning it down, but it can also mean moving it elsewhere onto a different place. You know, Brenner temporarily buried Dylan in that short time period, And then after witnessing family coming on down and stuff, if that's when Brenner decided and thought, you know what, maybe it's best now to move things on before they get too close, right? And if it is around the Grangeshed property at the time, but no longer there now, that's why Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, when they were searching that area, they didn't find anything because Dylan's body may have been moved on elsewhere. But which direction and how far away? This is very interesting, this article, because we've not heard much in recent time besides the hearings, right, and the talk about that. Let's continue reading. It also says here, Dylan's boots were found near the area where Brenner was living, and a cell phone was discovered at the bottom of a nearby pond, Lucen Pond. Dylan's boots being found behind the dirt mound near to the Grangeshed property and where Brenner was squatting. It also says, the pair knew each other, and Candice fears they became embroiled in an argument that resulted in Dylan being shot. Wow. That has never really been properly worded like that, at least from my memory. We've heard it from Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, that Dylan was taken out and killed. That's it. But in terms of the actual method, it was never really suggested or said with confidence. Yet, as mentioned here, Candice Cooley now is saying Dylan probably was shot. Now, yeah, it could seem very likely. And like with that time-lapse video or so, Brenner in his trailer on the day, that timestamp after Dylan's death, cleaning a gun. That gun could be the one that was used to take Dylan out. You never know. And it just seems likely because if Brenner in the past has had previous criminal history with malicious wounding and hurting and harming people, threatening people with the use of firearms, then that was probably the likely pattern and choice of weapon towards Dylan as well. But what does it mean by the pair knew each other and Candice fears? Right. So I assume when they say the pair knew each other, that means Dylan knew Brenner, Brenner knew Dylan because they were like in close proximity to one another. They've worked with each other in the past, custom farm work and on Dylan's farm himself. So because of being close, working, but also living, tension arose on the day, embroiled in an argument. And what would that argument be, consisting of? Maybe Brenner triggered because Dylan supposedly accidentally broke the horse gate near to or within the Grangeshed property, and that set Brenner off and he retaliated back. Anything else? Taken by surprise. That's other stuff. Pardon me. Okay. What's this? In a letter sent to the sheriff's office last August, Candice Cooley, also fumed about Dylan's disappearance not being reported to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NAMUS, until 4 weeks after he vanished. NAMUS, I remember that. New DNA evidence was found recently by expertly trained dogs and is being examined in hope of further pinning the disappearance on Brenner. Whoa. So, although I didn't mention it at the start of this video because I was unsure as to whether this article was in reference to what Weezer said about new evidence being found, well, I think we can confirm that it is the same one. And this is very interesting, this article. Not just the fact that it was mentioned that Candice Cooley believes that Brenner shot Dylan and how things unfolded on the day and some additional details there, but this here, new DNA evidence has been found. And, the way it's worded here, it implies that as of recently, from the looks of it, it doesn't give a date, unfortunately, but the way it's worded, new DNA evidence was found recently. So it could suggest and prove that searches have been out there, the expert ones. But what's very interesting? The fact that when Nate Eaton asked Candice Cooley regarding the update, specifically searching for Dylan, Candice Cooley did not mention any of this. Candice Cooley only said to Nate Eaton that searches are continuing on with specialised groups privately so the crazy people don't come on in. So why has this article revealed this when Candice Cooley never mentioned it in that East Idaho News interview with Nate Eaton? Is it because it was sensitive information? Have the Sun leaked what Candice Cooley said? I don't know, but this is very, very important. And I probably will adjust the title of this video as well. Because initially I was thinking to myself, I'll just call it new article because I wasn't sure the contents within, because I'm reading it on the spot right now for the very first time. So this is a raw reaction. But now how it's worded here, I think you could argue and say this is breaking news. New evidence, not just any evidence, but DNA evidence found recently by trained dogs and currently being examined. The hope of pinning it further on Brenner. Now, that last part, apologies, not the camera there, that last part sounds a little bit dodgy. Why would you want further hope on pinning it on Brenner when supposedly you already know that Brenner is the one responsible? The line, oh, further hope. We've got further evidence in hope of proving Brenner was the one, even though Brenner has already been charged. Okay, not convicted yet, but already been charged with the murder and desecration of Dylan. Do you really need any more additional DNA evidence to pin the blame on Brenner? No. You do probably need Dylan Round's remains to get that 100% conviction rate. But the way it's worded here, likely it's not Dylan Round's body, but other DNA. And if other DNA isn't exactly needed because it already seems likely and there's enough evidence stacked against Brenner for being the one responsible, then the way it's worded here, it would imply that people are desperate that more evidence can pin on Brenner because more people want it to lie on Brenner, which would make or interpret as a fall guy. Let's hope more dirt can be shifted onto Brenner in hopes that it proves that he's the one, even though there might be other stuff going on in the background. That last line does make me question slightly. Right? Just let me know if any of you think about that, because if you're in a position where there's enough evidence, then why would you need to be hopeful in a slightly desperate way that there's more that can be shifted onto him when you know it's already him? If you're already confident, then you shouldn't have to be hoping in a desperate way that there's more on him. You should be hopeful that you can find Dylan and find the main goal there, but as for additional background stuff, it's like you're scratching away, clawing desperately to try and pin the blame on Brenner. That's how it comes off, the way it's worded here. Desperately trying to pin the blame on Brenner, trying to prove it when, in a sense, it's kind of already been proven. So who's trying to prove it? To themselves? To somebody else? To try and get the message across? I'm not quite sure. But let me know in the chat, more so let me know in the comment section as to what you think this new DNA evidence was. Found by trained dogs, canine unit, cadaver dogs, a scent, clothing. Does it belong to Dylan? Does it belong to Brenner? If it's to do with in hopes of this evidence being pinned onto Brenner, you'd think it'd be an item, object, or clothing which may have Brenner's DNA on it, maybe Dylan's too. But what are we thinking? Bones? A cap? A top? A bag? Backpack? A wallet, even though people have said that hasn't been found yet. I wonder. It's very vague, but it does seem quite important. It doesn't mention anything about in hopes of finding Dylan, but in hopes of pinning it on Brenner furthermore as additional evidence. Does this have any link to Brenner's court appearance being pushed back further because additional stuff has been found since? I wonder. And just in general, why hasn't Candice Cooley or Justin Rounds mentioned anything on Facebook or in the East Idaho News interview if new DNA evidence was found recently? And people could say, well, this article could be old and stuff. But as said earlier on in this article, it said that the Sun US sat down with Candice Cooley at Crime Con recently and had that one-on-one interview with her. So clearly she must have had that knowledge that new DNA evidence was found, passed it onto the Sun article, and then the article posted it here publicly, right? If anyone has joined, all of a sudden, welcome. Make sure to rewind back to the beginning to fully understand everything that's gone on today in this video. Very important, of course. So This is what I was saying. This is what was needed. All this silence and then boom, something is found. And I was genuinely questioning recently, as some of you will know, how much more evidence is out there. Are we looking for directional evidence, which could point in a direction to where Dylan's at? Or is it just simple evidence which could add to the case? Now, what does this fall under? Because it's DNA evidence and it was found by dogs, that would imply it's pretty important. And it's either linked to Brenner or Dylan, likely. Is it Dylan's remains? I'm not sure. Is it a piece of it? I'm not sure. Could be clothing, could be anything. I don't know if I'll do a poll. Maybe I could, or maybe I already have done. At any point, feel free to vote, right? I've not seen anybody else covering this as for videos. I do understand that Weezer and Tom were some of the first people to mention this, more so Weezer, because she came across the article a day or two ago. And ever since, I've been trying to find this article and I had no luck whatsoever. Tried asking about, no one else could find the link. So that was really odd. I typed it in, US Sun, Dylan Rounds, nothing. I typed in the Sun article, Dylan Rounds, nothing. And then just randomly yesterday, I just typed in Dylan Rounds, clicked news, recent, and then it showed up. I tried it again afterwards and then it disappeared again. Very, very dodgy, but luckily I pinned it to the notes so I was able to find the link once again. But, you know, this is very interesting. This is very, very good to see. You know, despite how it's been worded elsewhere, oh, nothing's happening and it's come to a silence or maybe a standstill, and yet we've got this all of a sudden. I do also want to mention, is there a very, 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 very small percentage of that this could be worded as in DNA found in the past? Well, you could argue that, but I'd say more so this seems recent and relevant. And it's probably good that it came about now before winter time. Let's just see what else is mentioned here. It goes on to say, another preliminary hearing, which was scheduled for Monday, October 2nd, has now been moved to Monday, November 13th, but Candice has already seen enough false dawns to last a lifetime. Right, so after it mentioning from that to the hearing, I'd say this is all relevant to now. So yeah, that new DNA evidence likely recently. That's very interesting there. Candice Cooley, her reaction to this is it could get delayed again at November time, even though it's the last continuance. Who knows? Anything's possible. Could explain to why Candice Cooley was somewhat emotionless in that Facebook post when she was reacting and informing people about the date being shifted back. You know, Justin Rounds showed true emotion, slightly different. If anyone has joined and wants to see Justin Round's reaction to that, well, rewind back to the start of this video and then you'll find it, okay? In this article, it says in quotes, I understand our judicial system is slow, Candice told the US Sun, but no arraignment in 7 months is just unacceptable. If nothing happens with this next hearing, I will push for a change of venue. The process has to move, something has to happen. Wow. So some form of direct action. Once again, Candice Cooley, at a time of where things aren't really moving and frustration is building, she is willing to push back. Something we've not seen for a while now. You think back to 2022, Candice Cooley was very verbal, very vocal about things and criticising the likes of the LE, etc. And then more so 2023, later on, it went quiet, didn't it? And it's been quiet ever since. And we thought that maybe Candice Cooley was more satisfied with how things were going, but looks like that's come short once again because of the judicial system. So, Candice Cooley is basically saying that on November 13th, if nothing happens, if the next hearing is pushed back, delayed, that Candice Cooley will push for a change of venue. What does that really mean? Change the court? Seek out some other court to look into the case of Brenner? Is that even possible in Utah or not? Does anyone know? Let me know your thoughts down below because I'm not quite sure here, but it seems like if it doesn't go to plan, Candice Cooley will do something about it. And this is the thing. Yes, whilst Justin Rounds is possibly actively looking for Dylan Rounds and more focused on that, and Candice Cooley appears to be more about the media, both can complement each other. You need to understand that in some way, right? If things have been problematic previously with the LE or how the case has been handled, but it's slightly improved since. That's partially because of Candice Cooley constantly nagging and complaining and encouraging others to do so. So there's a bit of movement, right? Justin Rounds doesn't seem to be that way. He seems a bit more laid back, but more focused and determined on finding Dylan. Boots on ground, more physical. But could Justin Rounds do what Candice Cooley does when trying to push forwards with the court, the law, the state of Utah and stuff? Probably not. Can Candice Cooley do what Justin Rounds does? Physically demanding, focused on finding Dylan. Maybe not as much physically. So, like, little pros and cons. This person can do this, but they can't do what that other person does, and that other person can't quite do what this person does. So they're in their own little fields and elements. Just like applying to YouTube, microcosm of someone like me, Warlight Raff, covering it online, documenting it, comparing, contrasting, looking deeper for thoughts and reasoning, and then others out there who are recording but documenting their physical searches. Each one complements each other and are different ways of getting the message across. So there's a lot mentioned here all of a sudden, right? Be sure to rewind back if you need to take it in. It says Candice and the rest of Dylan's family have been tearing their hair out after some baffling moves from the authorities. She questioned why Brenner was given 2 attorneys. In quotes, by law, he shouldn't get 2 attorneys. It's not capital murder and it's not the death penalty, she said. She will also, Candice Cooley, never understand why it took so long for sniffer dogs to be unleashed around the area where it's believed Dylan was last seen. That's true, that. In quotes, it's almost as if they are waiting for him, Brenner, to die, she said. I just don't understand it. We have the evidence to prosecute and we have the charges. Well, if you've got the evidence to prosecute and the charges, then why was it mentioned earlier on in this article on further hope on pinning this new DNA evidence to put the blame on Brenner when you've already got enough evidence? There shouldn't be hope when you're confident and you know things are ready to get going. It just may be that the remains of Dylan Rounds need to be found to establish that movement forwards completely. Possibly. Let me know your thoughts down below. Yes, the sniffer dogs. Initially, Candice Cooley says here she doesn't understand why they weren't deployed at the beginning, but technically, Candice Cooley actually explained why they were delayed at the beginning. And I'll just reiterate it right now for some that don't remember. Candice Cooley initially said that when Dylan Rounds' boots were found near the dirt mound, they had a little bit of blood upon them, like a speckle on one of the boots. And that the way the LE handled them, they chucked them on the back of one of their trucks. It was kind of disrespectful, key evidence, and just thrown away like that. That followed up with Candice Cooley mentioning that the LE wanted the cadaver dogs to use those boots in possibly as a scent to locate Dylan Rounds, because if those boots belonged to Dylan, it could have Dylan's scent on them. And supposedly those boots were the ones that Dylan wore at the time of going missing, so it was kind of fresh. So on one side, the boots that needed to be taken to the labs for DNA testing to test what was on that, the prints of Brenner, finding out about that later. And that blood spot on one of the boots, the boots needed to be taken in to the lab to be analysed and assessed just in case anything important was found on them and if it pinned onto a key suspect out there. But all of that was delayed by a bit because the police wanted those boots to be used coexisting with the usage of the bloodhound unit, the dogs, for the dogs to use the shoes as a scent to try and locate Dylan, whether it be Dylan's remains at the time or where Dylan was possibly alive. But even that was delayed. 2 lots of things were delayed. That's what the incompetent part is. And then because of the rainfall roundabout at that time, there was further delays and excuses. Oh, well, we can't use the dogs now because it's raining and it's gone to a 20% chance success rate, so it's just not worth doing. And then after that, I guess it just delayed more, which I'm not quite sure as to why. So that's just the backstory there. So for when Candice Cooley says, I don't understand why they were delayed, well, she kind of does understand because she briefly explained it at the beginning. Does anyone remember what I just said then? Let me know. And that bit there, that quote, from Candice Cooley's point of view, it's almost as if the LE are waiting for Brenner to die before they act upon the case. Well, that would be very weird, that, wouldn't it? Would that imply that the LE are working with Brenner and vice versa? They're protecting him in some way, and that's why things are being delayed? I wonder. Because that was an alternative theory by other viewers out there. Anyway, Candice says here, well, it says, Candice was pleading with Box Elder officials to bring in forensic dogs who are crucial in these cases that take place in vast rural areas after being contacted by the team who owns them. In quotes, Candice Cooley says, I looked out when they came to me after seeing what happened to Dylan, she admitted. Very rarely do they work side by side with the family in a criminal investigation. It does not happen. But where we weren't getting help from Box Elder, they reached out to us and were like, holy smokes, we need to help this family. It still took us a week to get them on board as they needed to be invited by Box Elder. When you're specifically looking for bodies, these dogs come in, they're amazing. The strain on Candice and her husband Justin has been immense. Not only have they been battling with law enforcement, but she claims a nasty human being claiming to be a private investigator has been hounding the family. So that nasty human being Candice Cooley describes is Jim Terry, the private investigator. Candice Cooley says an unnamed person latched onto the case and has been stalking them ever since. In quotes, there are trolls out there, she said. This guy was trying to make money out of what's happened. It's disgusting. The battle for the truth continues, but Candice won't stop until it's over. In quotes, Brenner is not going to tell us anything until the charges are real, she concluded. He wanted to cut a deal with some of the other charges, but there's no way in hell we will leave this unsolved. Box Elder Police Department did not immediately respond to the US Sun's request for comment. Well, that's typical. Anyway, let's just focus back on these few paragraphs or sentences. So it just goes to show that even though Jim Terry is in the past, and although Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds have mainly not mentioned Jim Terry's name since, it's crept up once again, and I guess that's because Jim Terry still has been commenting on the family, whether it be directly or in the background on YouTube or Rumble or anywhere else. But maybe Candice Cooley Justin have heard about it or have been on the receiving end of it, a form of harassment. So it's still ongoing till this day. Because Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds decided to fire Jim Terry from being a private investigator on the case, that left a bitter taste in Jim Terry's mouth and has led to a full-on long-term grudge, which is still ongoing. So it doesn't sound too good, that. But the quote here by Candice, Brenner is not going to tell us anything until the charges are real. Well, if Brenner is not going to tell us anything, then why was he willing to open up about the location of Dylan's body in the past and you turned it down? Forgot about that? I wonder. I know it mentions here, in addition, Candice Cooley did say that Brenner wanted to cut a deal with some other charges. With some other charges? What? It was never worded like that in the past. The way Candice Cooley worded it back then, that Brenner opened up to his attorney that he was willing to reveal the location of Dylan's body, but the family didn't want to accept that offer and turned it down. Nothing was mentioned about other charges. And if it was mentioned about other charges, well, the other charges are the firearm ones, which don't have anything to do with Dylan Rounds. So why would Brenner open up and reveal something about Dylan's location of where it's been buried in response to unrelated charges being lessened because of him opening up. There'd be no link whatsoever because those charges don't link to what Brenner is talking about if he was to confess. It's two separate things. So that's worded incorrectly here. So that's it of the article there. After reading that article, I would say that's probably one of the best ones I've read in a while because quite a bit was referenced from back in the past and some stuff what I've never really heard before. Whether it's a contradiction or not, it's interesting to hear. And on top of that, new stuff being found recently. Considering how long this case has gone on for and the massive gap in between from finding one thing to another, the fact that there are still DNA out there is very interesting when Candice Cooley did mention in the past and say, such as those 2 final hit locations where dogs were reacting in a certain way to highlight that DNA was there, maybe belonging to Dylan, but forensics were never taken on those samples of the areas and it went to waste, no more DNA there, yet DNA has been found elsewhere on an object or something in the ground, I don't know. But there are still ongoing things. So when people say nothing's going on out there, no searches are taking place, well, something's been found recently. Isn't that a good thing? Let me know your thoughts down below. Yes, it could be classified secretive, classified, bit vague. Will we find out the truth behind it? Maybe. Does it tie in with what any other true crime channels were talking about recently? Or is it something completely different? I wonder. Yes, it's a waiting game. I don't know if it'll be mentioned by Candice Cooley directly on Facebook or in a future East Idaho News interview, but when people say that Crime Con was a waste of time, that Candice Cooley, it was pointless her going, she was too focused at the bar. Well, just acknowledge one thing for the people watching, okay? For the people watching, and those in the background that might complain, whinge or whine, the only reason why this article came out by The Sun, the only reason why new evidence was found and talked about and released publicly to an extent was all because Candice Cooley attended CrimeCon and also had a talk with the US Sun. If she never attended, then we would probably not be hearing this at this moment and we would be further in the dark. So that's one thing to acknowledge, right? So, who knows what will happen next? But one thing for certain, what we do need to do now is look back at previous comments on the other videos. I think there might be 2 sets of videos or so. We'll just see how we are for time. Maybe I'll get through both or just one. We'll see. If anyone has joined, as I said, I do stress, make sure to rewind back. If you are late or you feel late, you do need to rewind back to the start of this video because it's all mentioned there, all the important bits and bobs for you to follow and understand. As for everybody else still watching, appreciate that. Let's now look at the comments on YouTube and see if there's any questions that need to be answered, if there's any additional key interesting information over there. I will just adjust it to the newest comments. We start from the bottom. Not as many this time round. We've got Glenn. Shout out to Glenn. Skeptical. I'm not in the chat, but I agree with what you are saying. Candice Cooley is odd. Okay. Skeptical also says, reward was for a body or location of body, correct? The reward was for information or evidence only. Everyone in Dylan's life could be implicated. CL would be 100,000 richer since she seems to know exactly what happened. Who's CL? Corey LeBur. Okay, I get that because Corey has said a lot recently that you think that if the reward money was still up for just information, she would be receiving that. Well, at least how it's been worded in the past was the reward money initially was for information upon leading to finding Dylan Round's body and thus a conviction, Brenner being sent down. So it's like an all-in-one deal. You could have found evidence which didn't find Dylan's body. Are you going to get the money? No. Whatever you find or the information you have has to lead to Dylan being found. That's what the condition was with the money, and it was never met. No one ever got the money. So what was the point in it sitting about? That's why it was withdrawn from the looks of it. Skeptical says, Dylan was doomed from the start. He had no business being in that isolated, dangerous place. I believe Dylan would have still met his demise even if Jim Brenner was locked up previously. Many people had their eyes set on Dylan because he stood out, I guess. If Jim Brenner didn't have previous charges and only in for Dylan's death, the court dates would still continued. Everything about Dylan's case is secretive, private, and delayed. Okay, fair enough. Thanks for answering that question, Skeptical. Yeah. But the thing is, if Dylan wasn't in Luton, Utah, and he went to a different state, a different area, likely he probably still would have gone to an isolated location if it best suited him, whether it be the cost of the land or the quality of the ground, let's just say. So if at any point Dylan Rounds was isolated anywhere else, he would equally just as much of a target as he was in Luton, Utah, right? And it doesn't always have to be people who are locals. It could be ones further afar. So if Dylan Rounds was elsewhere, away from the likes of Brenner, Don, Kurt, etc., in a different state, and Dylan was in an isolated place, and you had people from afar that came on in, visitors, and took advantage of Dylan in some way, it could still happen. It's the factor of isolation of Dylan Rounds surrounded himself by family, or friends, or let's say worked in an area near to those type of people, then the isolation wouldn't be exactly there, and Dylan could be considerably more safer, possibly. Even in a location, if he was able to farm and there was some form of surveillance cameras within the community, the neighbourhood, let's say. I know that doesn't apply that often, but it could have been another safety net protection, right? Moving on. Skeptical. Candice Cooley spoke at CrimeCon. Has her speech been made public? Right, so what, like at the desk, at the table, talking out public? Like one of those Comic-Con conventions where they line up on the front stage? Well, I don't know if it has been made public. I've not seen anything about it, but one thing that has been made public is that one-on-one interview with the US Sun and Candice Cooley at CrimeCon, in which we've just read that article. If you want to see more about it, be sure to rewind back and catch up there. Skeptical responding to Indiana. I wonder about Nate Eaton as well and his true thoughts on Dylan's case. Yeah. What is Nate Eaton thinking regarding Dylan Rounds' case? Is he in agreement with Candice Cooley just in Rounds, or does he think for himself, but he's holding that back because he doesn't want to upset the family? Let me know in the chat what you think. Do you think that Nate Eaton is on Candice Cooley just in Rounds' side because of those connections in the background, or does he think differently, but he can't reveal his true thoughts? Cleo, thank you. You're welcome. Skeptical cheese fries. Are you hungry? Cleo, gorilla in the background. Yes, there was a gorilla in the background with the Coca-Cola bottle on the lampshade previously. I think you're the only person that picked up on it. No one else mentioned the gorilla. Interesting. Shout out to Skeptical for all these comments. That's very helpful. Skeptical saying, if Dylan's parents couldn't tell him what to do and Dylan was hard-headed and made his own decisions, why would Larry Rounds and Dylan need to do anything behind their backs? Contradiction. Warlike Wrath may not have children, but I do. Before War gave his response to this short-sighted comment, I think by 28 Alice, that caused me to comment out loud. He said exactly what my parental response was. So it doesn't matter if people have kids to understand and comment on parents if the commenter is properly raised and has common sense. So shout out there for Skeptical for backing it up. That's good of her to do so. And once again, even when the likes of 28 Alice used the line, you have to have it to know about it. If you don't, you've got no clue. Well, clearly, I do have a clue. And clearly, it's all under control. Moving on. Someone called Laura. Shout out to Laura. Wait, is that Dale Laura or another Laura? I can't tell. I'm going to click that. It's a different Laura. Shout out to Laura with a dog profile pic saying Brenner's case would be more than likely still be delayed even if no previous charges were on Brenner. This happens very regularly with criminal cases. Okay, I see. Thanks for responding to that question. Tom, adding to Weezer, can you tell me about the article you were talking about, where to find it? Google US Sun, maybe add Dylan's name and it should pull up. Well, as said, I did try that and it didn't work. I only found it by luck. It just magically popped up once and yeah. So we managed to read it. Let me know, Weezer and Tom, your thoughts on that finding down below in the comments. Smooth Fishing, you are 100% right. You can't start the healing process until there is closure. There we go. Boom. I know Watcher of Crazy had a different alternative viewpoint on it, which is true to an extent, but that does not apply to the Dylan Rounds case based off how it's gone and what's been worded previously. I can add on in a second. June saying, I don't know why I never thought of Kenny Veach and no one looking for him, but maybe because his family wasn't so out there in the news, or because he wasn't 19. Did law enforcement spend much time looking in the family? Is it because he is alive and they know it? Well, possibly, yeah. The lack of care and concern from the family, the fact that they appeared in a Kenny Veach documentary many years on in 2022, after all that time, and now they want to do an interview, but not actually go out there searching, nor hand out flyers. No social media response in, can you find Kenny Veach? Have you seen this person? Not a single Kenny Veach missing person poster out there. Yes, he's on the NamUs database, but besides that, absolutely nothing else. The Las Vegas Metro Police Department gave up quick and treated it as a cold case, and aren't shown much interest in it either when the likes of Susan Veach, the sister-in-law to Kenny Veach, tried reaching out to them, and it was played off and cooled off. The fact that Kenny Veach's father, Ted Veach, supposedly committed suicide and was a police officer in the past, but there was a blue wall of silence there and a possible level of corruption. There's a lot going on in the background, June, when it comes to Kenny Veach. And the fact that the family did not go out there searching, and the fact that the girlfriend said that they reported Kenny missing 2 days after, but in fact that was a lie. It was 8 days late, which is weird. Why would you lie about that? A lot of dodginess in the background, and I don't think that many people acknowledge it, because there's a lot of people out there that only followed the same old regurgitated story about the Kenny Veach case, which is told by the big YouTube channels that don't bother doing their own research because they're lazy bastards. But that aside, let's just move on. We've reached the end of the comments here. Let me just add my thoughts on in response to Watcher of Crazy and Smooth Fishing response. So when it comes to closure, Indiana mentioned last night or the night before, it's basically where you forgive somebody when something bad has happened. That's where the closure lies, in reaching out, having a heartfelt conversation with the killer, with the suspect, the burglar, whatever it is, the perpetrator, and them explaining and maybe even apologizing and you forgiving them. And then you can all move forward and then begin the healing process. Yes, but, and there is a but, because that hasn't happened here in the Dylan Rounds case. So is that why Candice Cooley said there is never any closure? Well, in that regard, probably, because Brenner probably would never reach out to Candice Cooley nor apologise or have that form of closure. But let's just remember one thing, Indiana. Just like when it comes to desecration, which is an umbrella term, the form of closure can come in many different ways besides forgiving someone. You can have closure, you can move forward, you can heal, and you don't have to forgive them, right? Because that's just one way. Other forms of closure. What is closure? Well, where you reach a resolve. You finally get answers, whether it be answers from the perpetrator, them explaining their thoughts, how they feel and why they did what they did and coming to a resolve there, or a resolve in something being found, a missing object, a missing valuable that was taken from you, and you want that closure in it coming back into your possession. So now you're happy again and you can move on. Or in this case with Dylan Rounds, the closure in finding Dylan's remains. More so in the past, maybe finding Dylan alive, but that's changed since. So by finding the answers, whether it be directly from Brenner or by themselves and external groups, if they can find the remains, then a part of it, of that missing puzzle, that missing part within them is finally filled. That void has gone. Then they can move on with the justice for Dylan Rounds and Dylan Rounds' legacy, and possibly the conviction and justice overall, and then heal from there. And maybe then that's when Candice Cooley opens up and reveals her true emotions, because Candice Cooley did say in the past, besides the we want closure and all of that, is that I can't open up now. Maybe in the future we'll have a counsellor, we'll have a therapist, and that's when maybe I can reveal and break down myself and we can talk it all through. But for now, got to keep it together. Someone has to hold it together and keep on pushing for justice for Dylan and the search for him. That's what was taught by Candice Cooley in the past, right? So closure is on hold at this moment in time. But what Candice Cooley did say recently, where the whole discussion came about, where Candice responded to someone on Find Dylan Brown's Facebook page and randomly said, there is no closure, only healing. And I question that, because how can you heal without closure? Watcher Crazy then came in and commented saying, well, I know somebody that did heal without closure. Well, okay then. Yes, it probably could happen. Maybe more to do with acceptance and a bit of forced healing, overcoming something you just can't have, which is closure, and trying to move on that way, which may not always work for everyone, but it can for some. It's not the best result, but you're just working with what you have. But that, Watcher Crazy, that what you mentioned, Watcher, does not apply in the Dylan Rounds case, because in the Dylan Rounds case, at least still up to now, it could change in the future, of course, but up to now, the goal is to find Dylan's remains. They are out there somewhere. There is still that opportunity of closure eventually. And if it is ever met, then the healing process can begin, right? And because of that article, what we read today, the breaking news of new evidence, DNA evidence being found by dogs, what could that lead to? A new lead, a new direction? I guess time will tell. But hopefully that explains it to people. And it's good of Smooth Fishing to add in his points. And the reason why he understands me is because he himself has gone through stuff in the past. So for all the whingers and whiners out there that show resistance or denial, listen to Smooth Fishing. Key individual from the past, came from the Kenny Beach case and community, has their own experiences, and they can apply their own experiences and knowledge to what's going on to these cases here. So it should be listened to and acknowledged. And like with in other circumstances with what Skeptical has said recently, it's worth listening to her. And it's good that Skeptical leaves a lot of comments as well, because it helps with the discussions and generates new ideas. So it's all very helpful. So I think there is still probably time to acknowledge the other video to catch up on those comments, because we're on a bit of a backlog, right? So let's just head on to the last Dylan Brown's video I did and acknowledge the comments there. Once again, I will adjust it to the newest comments. We start from the bottom. Not as many this time, I guess. Claire saying, Dylan! Victoria, shout out to Victoria, a new viewer. And they say, is this Justin's latest post? I think there's another one up today or yesterday. That's correct. And hopefully if you're watching now, Victoria, I did look at it and analyse it. Badger Life saying the chat is disturbing. Oh, the chat from last night. Feel free to explain, Badger Life, in the chat or comment section to what you mean by it being disturbing. I didn't pick up on it myself. Maybe I missed something. Who was it exactly and what was mentioned? Cleo, appreciate your informing me. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome. So this thing, Cleo, you keep saying that I'm ignoring you or I'm timing you out or I'm freezing you out. Take in mind, Cleo, of course, you probably leave the most comments out there besides everybody else on my channel, right? You do leave the most comments. I mean, if you have a quick look here, you've left 1,000 plus comments on my channel in comparison to Badger Life, 300. So take in mind, Cleo, I can't respond back to 1,000 comments by you because that's a lot, right? You know, think about the other YouTube channels out there that get 10,000, 100,000 views. Do they respond back to everybody? No, because they may not have the time or they're doing other things in between. They can't look at everything at once. Now, up to a certain point, I can in a way because I'm not getting as many views. So there's less comments to look back at. But take in mind, at times, the comments by you, Cleo, I don't always respond because sometimes I'm busy doing other things, or some of the comments don't really warrant a reply because the comment by you wasn't maybe more rhetorical, right? Or wasn't really asking the question. And, you know what I'm saying? Some comments come off as needing more engagement. That's why there is a response. And then other times it just isn't always really needed, right? I know one of the recent threads, Cleo, I don't know if you were having a bit of a meltdown or something because I wasn't responding back to you because of those videos you copy and pasted from my channel, but I saw that was resolved, so it didn't need to follow on after that, but you've continued to do that, Cleo, so I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, moving back, we got Indiana. How many comments have Indiana left on this channel? 800. Whew, how many of those are poems, I wonder? Indiana says, we have only had 2 hits from the cadaver dogs, true, grain shed and loose in pond. Is it really loose in pond, Indiana? I know the grain shed possibly, but when Candice Cooley worded it herself when I heard it for the first time, and it wasn't that long ago, she said 2 locations, but she didn't really explain where those 2 locations were. She then quickly moved on to the grain shed, so I guess you could imply or it could infer that that's one of the locations she was speaking about. But what about Lucin Pond? Do you know, Indiana, where and when she mentioned the pond in relation to the hit location? Because I don't remember hearing that. I mean, if it really and truly is that, then I can understand why Lucin Pond has been dug up twice and double checked because of that then. Anyway, what else? Could Dylan have been found in the pond when it was dredged? Lucin Pond is owned by the railroad. It takes a lot to get permission to do this, along with all the cost. After all, Dylan's phone was found there. It was where it last pinged, and when looking for a body, the last phone ping counts for everything. I guess so. I mean, the last phone ping can be important for finding the body if a person wasn't killed, but more so they fell and had an accident, because likely they were walking along and then died for whatever reason and the phone was still on them. But if foul play is involved, then likely things were taken off the body at the time, whether it be for personal gain or to remove the track and trace, so like the phone, possibly. And as well, we've not had any indication yet that Dylan has been found. DNA evidence, new evidence has been found, but we don't know what that is exactly. Summer, shout out to Summer, new viewer. Warlight Ref, you're giving Keanu Reeves vibes. Well, that's interesting. Keanu Reeves. What? Am I giving off John Wick vibes like the character he plays, or literally Keanu Reeves? Is there anyone in the chat watching now that agrees that I have Keanu Reeves vibes? But yeah, that's interesting. Shout out to Summer for saying that. June, Candice Cooley said they feel Dylan is somewhere in the area of the phone pings. Makes sense, and last ping at the pond, but Skeptical said he could have then brought his body to the cookout after getting rid of the phone. So much to take in. Right, okay, if this was my son, I'd already be in jail or in nut house. Fair enough. Right, so passing on with Skeptical saying that because the phone was at Lucin Pond at the time of when Brenner was going on to Don's barbecue, Brenner could have taken Dylan's body to Don's barbecue and then did something there. You never know. Sinaloa, he's out there somewhere. Sinaloa, you there right now? And we got Glenn as well. Shout out to Glenn. Okay, so we got through those comments pretty quick and efficiently. There we go. So of course it'll be interesting to see what happens next, because after all this silence for new evidence to come about all of a sudden, it goes to show that there is still unfinished business out there. And even after all this time, there are still opportunities to find new things. As to what they truly are, we don't know at this moment, but I'm sure we will find out eventually. Will this start off all more new rumours and all? I don't know. But I'll say one thing for sure. Whilst there might have been BS in the background, at least now we've looked at an official news article which seems to suggest more, which has come from, let's just be honest, Candice Cooley. Justin Rounds wasn't present at CrimeCon, so did that give Candice Cooley more freedom to say whatever without Justin protesting? I don't know. I don't think it would have made a difference because Justin never seems to stand up anyway. But what would have happened, and let's just word it like this, end it on a question cliffhanger before we go, is if Candice Cooley did not attend CrimeCon but Justin Rounds did, and Justin was interviewed by the US Sun, would we still have got the same article and information? Yes or no? With that being said, hopefully you enjoyed this video and found it interesting. I will see you next time, whenever that is. For now, thanks for watching, goodbye, and good night.